guys, welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've been here before. My name's Kayla, and today I'm going to be doing my November wrap-up. I've been kind of away from YouTube for a couple weeks, like not posting on the kind of weekly schedule I was trying to get on, but this has been a crazy time of year. It's like the end of a semester and it just, time has gotten away from me, but I have actually been reading a lot when I'm not decorating a Christmas tree. Isn't it so cute? I was like, let me try this as a background. Like, you can see my books and my cat beds. I was hoping there would be a cat in one of the cat beds, but there's not. So just have to deal with it. It's like daytime out, but I have the lights on. I don't know if it's like working, but yeah, I read 8 books this month and DNF'd 2. So I'm actually gonna start with the 2 I DNF'd because just kind of get it over with. I don't want to dwell on them. The first one was The Measure by Nikki Erlick, which is kind of, it's like everyone on Earth wakes up and they have like a package on their front step that has like a length of string that tells them like how long their life's gonna be or whatever. It's an interesting premise, but I just wasn't connecting to any of the characters, and that was like, I started that kind of right at the beginning of the month, and I was like, I'm not starting this month off with a book that like I'm probably gonna give like 2.5, 3 stars. So I'm sure it's a great book. I'd maybe be interested in like reading a physical copy because maybe I didn't like the narrator or something, but yeah. I know a lot of people really like it, but it just wasn't for me, so I just DNF'd it at like 15%. And then the other one was a book called The Haunting of Adeline by H.D. Carlton or something like that. This was a Kindle Unlimited book that somebody I follow on Twitter like mentioned that they kind of liked it, but like they weren't sure about it or whatever. And reading the summary, like I was like, oh, like it says like the manipulator, the shadow, something, the name. I was like, this has got to be like a dark human ghost romance. It has some warnings like this is a very dark book. There's some like dubcon, consensual non-consent, and I was like, okay, that's not usually kind of my thing, but I was like, it's spooky-ish season, you know, it's kind of like November feels kind of like dark academia season or something. So I was like, this idea of this girl being like haunted and having sex with a ghost sounds great. That's not what it is. The shadow is like a human stalker, and all of the sex is not consensual, non-consent. It's just non-consensual. So like, and the story just wasn't even good. Like the guy was just kind of weird, and it made it seem like the girl was also kind of like dark, but she was just like a normal girl, honestly. Like, I don't know if we were supposed to be like, she deserves to be stalked, because like, no. So that was a no. But I mean, some people like that stuff, like no judgment or whatever. It just wasn't really what I thought it was. Kind of a bad foray into the Kindle Unlimited world for me, but hopefully I'll find something good on Kindle Unlimited next. So then we get into the books that I actually read and liked, and there was actually like a pretty high month for me. I was gonna do like stats, but Storygraph isn't as good at giving you stats as like I think Goodreads is. So the first book I read was Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. 5 stars. I knew honestly, like as soon as I got into it, I was like, this is gonna be a 5-star book. Like, I feel like 5 stars in a lot of ways are just like vibes. Like, you know if it's a 5-star, you feel it in your heart, whether it's like a 4.5 is like a book that's really good, but it didn't get you, you know? I have like a 4.5, I have 2 4.5s here, but like 5 stars is a feeling. This follows the story of Alex Stern, who is an 18-year-old girl who, she can see ghosts, and she basically ends up in some shitty situation, and someone comes in when she's in the hospital and is like, hey, we want you to come to Yale and be part of the secret society Leith, which kind of monitors all the other secret societies. So you're like, so she, like, it's a great opportunity. She does it. She goes to Yale, and all the other secret societies are real. Leith is not. So it's like an dark academia book, but then there's like an occult magic element that's really, really cool. And as someone who lives like 20 minutes from New Haven and Yale and has spent some time in that area, it's kind of cool to be like talking about Yale and New Haven, and like the other main character, Darlington, is like from New Haven, so the way he views New Haven versus the way she does is very interesting. And there's a lot of like murder mystery elements and all this kind of stuff. It's just such like a well done story, and she's just such a likable character, and like having someone who comes from like a lower class background, and she's a woman of color and all this kind of stuff, like is a really interesting kind of play on this privileged world. So I love that. I loved it so much. I'm so excited for the sequel in January. Like, I need it now. And yeah, so that was 5 stars. Amazing. Next, I read Station 11, which I've kind of been wanting to read for a while, but because of COVID and the pandemic, I was like, I don't want to read a pandemic book, like a post-apocalyptic pandemic book, because everybody kind of knows what it is. But it's actually, I was really shocked that it doesn't focus a lot on the actual pandemic itself. There are parts that do, but the main story follows this kind of troupe of musicians and actors who kind of walk around towns kind of in the Midwest area, like performing Shakespeare and like music and everything. And there's like a cult element. Just really cool, and all the characters are really interesting. I really loved the stuff like at the airport. That was, I think, kind of some of the stuff that was really dealing with a lot of the pandemic, because there's all these people who kind of get stranded at an airport and they're just kind of stuck there. And yeah, so that, but it was so good. The writing was beautiful. I want to read more by Emily St. John Mandel next. So really good. I think I gave it 4.5 stars. Again, 5 stars is just a vibe, and it didn't quite get there. It weirdly like didn't make me cry, which I was like, a pandemic book is gonna make me cry, right? No. But I loved it, and the writing was just amazing, and I feel like probably other books of hers are 5 stars for me. I listened to the audiobook of Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister. I think it's pronounced Gillian. I really don't know. I should learn that. But yeah, so it is a book that kind of is set up like you think it's going to be kind of a classic mystery thriller. This mom, Jen, she looks out the window and sees in front of her house her 18-year-old son just murder somebody, just like a stranger. She's like, what? And then like gets arrested and all this stuff. And they're like, oh my God, so she's got to solve this crime. No. She wakes up the next day and she's back in time to the day before the crime, and then every day she goes back in time. So it's like a mystery thriller, but like a sci-fi element that like makes it so cool. And you're following, there's another point where you're like, there's kind of another timeline of this character Ryan, who's like a cop, and like that kind of is going like forward in time, and you're kind of like, oh my God, like they're gonna meet at the catalyst for this crime or whatever. But it just, the twists and turns are so good. There were literally like reveals that like I was driving listening at one point, and I was like going down the side road, and I literally like stopped the car. There's nobody else on the road, don't worry, it was safe. But I literally like stopped the car, like, what? Shut up. So yeah, and like it's just so good, and all the characters are really interesting, and the time travel element is so cool. And I really loved it. I love a time loop and time travel and all that kind of stuff. I think of myself as like not really a sci-fi person, but I think I really like when sci-fi is in other genres. So that's kind of like what I really loved about this. I gave it 5 stars because I was just blown away by it. I'd never read anything. I'm excited to read more from her. Absolutely loved it, and it takes place in like outside of Liverpool, so the accents that the narrator was doing, I didn't write down the narrator's name because I'm trash, but the accents that she was doing were so fun. I love all those kind of northern England accents. They're the best. Like a character had a Welsh accent. Loved it. But yeah, I was just obsessed. If you've been looking at it and it's like a Reese's book club picks, which I know can be kind of hit or miss, if you've been like hesitant, like no, like read it. Next, I read Heartberries, which is a memoir by Terese Marie Mailhot. But it's a memoir of her life growing up on like an Indian reservation in British Columbia, and focuses a lot. It kind of starts when she's been hospitalized, kind of having like a nervous breakdown situation. She gets diagnosed with PTSD and bipolar 2. A lot of it is written like as almost like letters to her on, off again partner. It deals with kind of that relationship and like being in a relationship with someone who is mentally ill and carries a lot of shame and self-loathing. And then it also like tells the story of her life and the traumas that she's gone to, and like living on like an Indian reservation with an alcoholic father, and then her mother's like this kind of like badass like activist and all that kind of stuff. It's really good. It's just a really well written, really moving memoir. Yeah, I was trying to read more Indigenous writing for Native American Heritage Month, but this was the only one I finished. Then, because I was kind of going through it, I wanted something lighter, and I saw that Lemony Snicket, like the guy who wrote A Series of Unfortunate Events, came out with kind of a short book called Poison for Breakfast, which is basically he one day finds a scrap of paper right after he's finished breakfast that said, "You had poison for breakfast." So the whole story kind of follows him like walking around the town he lives in and investigating and trying to figure out like who poisoned him, what happened. And it was just really fun and easy. I literally read it in a day. It made me laugh out loud. It made me like cry a little bit. It's just, like I said, it's more of like a philosophy book, which I definitely agree with. And if you like the Lemony Snicket style of writing, because it's very stylized in the same way that A Series of Unfortunate Events is, but I would say it's for a little bit older. Like Series of Unfortunate Events, I would say, is probably like a middle grade, and this felt a little bit more like I read Series of Unfortunate Events in like middle school, but I feel like, and younger, but I feel like you could still like this book and maybe even get it more if you were like a little bit older than that. And I don't usually read a lot of like, as an adult, like middle grade or young adult books now, so it was just fun. It was just like exactly what I needed. And yeah, I gave it 5 stars because, you know, when you find a book where you're just like, this is what I needed today, just can't resist. 5 stars. Like, then I listened to the audiobook of A Long Petal of the Sea by Elizabeth Allende. I gave that 3.75, I believe, like rounded up to 4 for sure. It follows Victor and Rosaire Dalmau, who basically it follows them and a little bit of their family and their story through the Spanish Civil War in the 30s under like Franco and the fascists and everything. And they flee from that kind of after the fascists win, and then they end up in France at like basically like concentration camps for refugees, and then end up getting the opportunity because of Pablo Neruda to go to Chile. So they travel there, and just kind of about like everything they go through. They just constantly go through so much, like all these things we can't imagine, like they fleeing from a civil war and then traveling across the ocean with like only knowing like one other person traveling with you to another country and trying to like start a life there. And then when you finally do start a life, then in the 70s there was the coup, and now there's another fascist regime, and they have to deal with that. They have to leave Chile, and because they're like leftists and they're communists or whatever, and all this kind of stuff. And it just is about like these two people who like kind of become the world to each other. And it's just a really like beautiful story. And like there were parts that were kind of from other characters' points of view that I didn't really connect with. Like there's this character, Ophelia, I believe, who like she did nothing for me. Like I didn't really like her, and I didn't really feel like her perspective added anything to the story. She was just like a privileged rich girl in Chile, and you know, and the parts in the middle kind of dragged, especially dealing with that character and other kind of characters and stuff. But it was really good, and I definitely recommend it if you're looking to read more translated works. Definitely recommend it, and I'm I want to read more by her now because I like it, and I loved learning about parts of history I'd never really learned about before. Like, that was great, because I'm a history nerd, so give me history that I had never heard of. I mean, I heard of it, but you don't learn as much about what's going on in Spain. You really are focused on like Germany in World War II era, and then we learn nothing about South America. The American education system. And then I just randomly decided I wanted to read an Agatha Christie book, because like I love mysteries and have never read anything by her. So I got the audiobook for And Then There Were None, which is like one of her standalones, and it follows this group of 10 people who are invited by like a mysterious person, UN Owen, who they figure out unknown, to like this island off the coast of southwest England. And like slowly these 10 people start getting killed off one by one, and they realize like one of us is doing it because there's nobody here. And there's this whole thing with like there's this poem, and they're kind of getting killed off like in the order of the poem, and it's really good. It's really like suspenseful, and you're like, who's gonna die next and who did it? And like there's gotta be, like, I was convinced there was someone else on the island at one point. Every single person, I had like a list. I would be like, this person did it, and then they would die, and just like over and over again. It was so good. It was so well written. Like the ending, I was just like, what? So yeah, I gave that 5 stars because I had a great time. I definitely warn for like a couple little questionable elements. There's some like 1930s mild anti-Semitism just for no reason. And then obviously the original name of the book and of the poem, very racist, so I'm glad they've changed that. It doesn't like change anything about the thing to change it, so I'm glad they did that. Like, but yeah, I loved it. 5 stars. And then I was on a roll and I'm mentally ill, and I was like, I need another little cozy mystery vibe. So I decided I need another cozy mystery, another Agatha Christie. So I was like, let me try like an Hercule Poirot. Poirot. That was like the 5th take of trying to say his name, Poirot. I can say his last name fine, but when I try to put the first name with it, then it becomes like this little scramble in my mouth. But yeah, so it's the first Poirot book, and it basically follows, it's from the point of view of Hastings, which a lot of the Poirot books are. And basically Hastings is home on leave from World War I, and he is invited to his friend's like big country manor, and his friend's stepmother just gets murdered. So Poirot comes in to try and solve it. It's like, these are the people that were in the house, these are all the stuff, and it's like so interesting. I was shocked again, like, because like it's just so well done. Like there's so many twists and turns, and the whole time you're like, because you're following Hastings, and I'm like, well, Hastings is stupid and knows nothing, so I know more than Hastings. Like I'm doing better than him, but like I cannot get to Poirot's level. So I'm just like amazed, and I am obsessed with that little Belgian man, like obsessed. He is off his rocker. Like he is just so unhinged. He's just having a great time. He's just calling everyone mon ami. Like I love him. Like he is my new best friend. He is my comfort character. Like love him. And it's really interesting because like that was a very xenophobic time in the world, but especially in the UK. So to have the main character be Belgian, the moments of xenophobia are kind of expressed as like a negative thing, like to be like, oh, like there's a character who says like, oh, I don't like foreigners, but I like you. And it's like, well, that's kind of, it's like presented as like, that's stupid of her to say. There are some racist bits that were a little, listening to the audiobook and hearing someone say the N-word was unnecessary, honestly. Like I don't necessarily think we need to like sanitize writers' potential racism and act like it didn't happen. Like, these are conversations that need to be had, but I really feel like we could have maybe just changed that word. But yeah, and like there's talk of someone dressing up as like an Apache warrior. Like, I understand that this is 1916 or whatever, but like, if we're gonna change the original title of And Then There Were None, and then the American title of Then There Were None, and then, you know, end up with And Then There Were None as the final title, like, can't we go in and edit some like slurs, some racial slurs out of this book? But yeah, I think it was a really, really good mystery. I was surprised. I didn't like it as much as And Then There Were None. I'd say it's a good like 4.5. I think it was a really good like introduction to the character and how these type of mysteries work and all of that. So that was great. And I had fun with that. So yeah, that's my November wrap up. 8 books, 2 DNFs. I'm hoping to read just as many in December. December's usually a pretty good reading month, so as soon as the semester is over, hopefully I will do great. Some really high highs, some really assaulty, no ghost sex lows, and a new favorite little Belgian guy. So thanks so much for watching. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought, and if you also want Poirot to be your grandfather. Let me know. Okay, bye.